because then you have to reconcile which side are you on. Am I being patient, or is patience becoming an excuse for doing the thing that's easy, which is nothing? Okay, so up to a point, I'm gonna be patient, and then I'm gonna say, okay, we might have to go back to the drawing board.
I know it's gonna work. And so the patience that I am affording the process is a little passive in a way, because I know I'm going to get my outcome if I do everything properly.
But because you were impatient, the further that timeline is gonna extend on trying to attain your objective. And so August 1st is still gonna show up. It's just on that day when you wake up, you're just not gonna be what you were expecting. Of like your grit versus patience. Grit would say, suck it up, get it done. And patience says, pay attention. We might have to adapt here. Welcome everyone to the Transferable Everything podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Schulteis, and this is my co-host, James Keating.
What's up?
This week, we're going to be talking about patience. Patience. Last episode, we talked about grit, about pushing through, about holding the line when everything in you wants to let go. Grit is often loud. Grit is dramatic. Grit gives you something to fight against. In the famous words of Mr. Goggins, who's going to carry the boats? Patience gives you nothing. That is exactly what makes it harder. Patience might be the most misunderstood virtue in the entire framework. We treat it like it's passive, like it is just waiting. Like patience is what you do when there's nothing to do. But that is not patience. That is just the absence of action. True patience is one of the most active and demanding things a person can practice. It is the discipline to remain committed to a process when the results refuse to show themselves. To keep showing up when the world gives you absolutely nothing back. No progress, no feedback, no evidence that what you are doing matters at all. And I think most people confuse patience with grit because from the outside, they look the same. Both involve showing up day after day. Both involve endurance, but on the inside, they are completely different experiences. Grit is what you need when the resistance is high, when every step costs something, when there is an obstacle in front of you and you have to push through it. Grit fights. Patience does not fight anything. Patience sits with the absence of progress and refuses to interpret that absence as failure. Grit requires intensity. Patience requires surrender without resignation. That is a critical distinction because a lot of driven, ambitious, capable people have an abundance of grit and almost no capacity for patience. They know how to push through walls. They do not know how to sit in an empty room and trust that the door will eventually open. There's an undercurrent to patience that most people never see. Pause for a second because we were talking about undercurrents, so that's interesting. Cool. We tend to evaluate everything by what is visible, by the surface, by the results we can measure. But the most important things in life are often happening beneath the surface, in places you cannot see and cannot measure. The relationship that is quietly deepening, the skill that is compounding without producing visible output yet, the character that is being forged in the silence between the work and the reward. Patience is the virtue that honors the undercurrent. It says, I trust that something is happening, even though I cannot see it. This connects to something philosophically important. The ancient Stoics were deeply patient thinkers. They were not interested in quick answers. They were interested in truth. And truth, by its nature, does not arrive on your schedule. Epictetus wrote, no great thing is created suddenly. It's not a motivational quote. That is a philosophical position. It is a claim about the nature of how meaningful things are built. If you are seeking truth, whether about the world or about yourself, you have to be willing to sit with not knowing, to hold the question open long enough for the honest answer to arrive, rather than grabbing the first convenient one. That is what patience really is. It is a form of philosophical honesty. It is the refusal to accept a premature answer just because the waiting is uncomfortable. And this applies everywhere. In business, the impatient entrepreneur launches a product, watches the market not respond immediately, and starts changing things. They pivot the strategy before it has had time to work. They restructure the team before the team has had time to gel. They interpret the absence of immediate results as evidence of failure rather than recognizing that some processes simply require time to compound. That is first-order thinking applied to a third-order problem. The decision to change course feels productive in the moment, but the second-order effect is that nothing ever gets the time it needs to work. And the third-order effect is a company that is always starting over, never building on what came before, not because the original decisions were wrong, because patience was never given a chance to prove them right. The same pattern shows up in parenting. We want our children to learn the lesson now, to show growth on our timeline. But children do not develop on your schedule. They develop on theirs. And the parent who forces acceleration, who cannot sit with the pace of natural development, who interprets slow progress as a problem to solve rather than a process to trust, often does more harm than the parent who simply stays present. Your child will not learn patience from a lecture about patience. They will learn it from watching you practice it, from seeing you stay calm when things are slow, from observing that you do not panic when the progress is invisible. It shows up in relationships, in recovery, in creative work, in anything worth building that does not give you immediate feedback. The question grit asks is, how long can I endure this? The question patience asks is, can I trust this process even when it gives me nothing back? Those two are very different questions, and most people only know how to answer the first one. There's also a tension inside patience that we need to talk about, because patience is not always the right answer. There are moments when patience becomes stubbornness, when staying becomes denial, when the evidence has accumulated and the honest response is not to wait longer, but to change direction entirely. Knowing the difference between patience and stubbornness is one of the hardest discernments you will face. And we will touch on that today because it connects directly to adaptability, which is the next virtue in the framework. But here's what I want to set up for this conversation. Patience is not passive. It is not the easy virtue. It is not what you practice when there is nothing else to do. It is sustained. Action without the rewards of visible progress. It is trusting the undercurrent when the surface shows you nothing. It is a philosophical commitment to the idea that truth and growth and meaningful outcomes do not arrive on demand. If you're building something right now and the results are not showing yet, this episode is for you. If you're in a season of silence and every instinct in your body is screaming to change something, this episode is for you. There's so many things to unpack within that.
Yeah, I'm still sifting through it all and trying to pick bits out to note it down and talk about it a little more. So I thank you in advance for your patience.
Well played.
Yes, sir. But yeah, tons and tons in there. I think one of the first things that I kind of want to talk about is, or just to propose, is are there ways in which we can categorize the types of situations in which one uses patience? Can we distill that down? When we're patient about something, or being patient, what comes after that? Is it because we're working, ultimately, if we pull it back, is there a goal or an outcome in mind? And patience is simply a tool that we utilize to allow ourselves to get there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why it sits where it sits in the framework. And, going back to step one in the framework being vision, agency, and sort of setting a goal for yourself. And downstream of all of that, you're working towards your goal. That's why grit comes first. You're struggling, but you're overcoming obstacles and so forth. But you're not actually seeing the results that you want. It's trusting the process, trusting you've done the homework towards the ends, and the means doesn't exist quite yet. You're not seeing the results. Now, I think towards the end, in the overview, which it captured it perfectly because this is in the book, is that there's a tension because you can't just sit with patience forever.
Right.
That's stagnation. That's that can show up as laziness, whatever. So you do have to wrestle with the tension. And I think every virtue in the framework has its an opposing force. It has a tension that works against it. And that's where things like cognitive dissonance will come in, because then you have to reconcile which side are you on. Am I being patient, or is patience becoming an excuse for doing the thing that's easy, which is nothing?
Sure.
It's a hard thing to reconcile, but I think it is like a great example is because it's common on like people's fitness or nutrition journeys is to be patient and trust the process, which is a really hard thing to do, because maybe you have a ton of motivation. You've set your goal. I want to drop 30 pounds. I want to get X amount of muscle mass. I want to get my BMI to a certain spot, my VO2 max up to a certain spot.
Yeah.
Whatever your goals and objectives are in that space. And you're working hard. You're using your grit every morning. You're getting up at 5. You're getting to the gym. You're doing all those things. So that's where grit's pushing you through. And then after a couple of weeks, you step on the scale, whatever your KPI is of how you're measuring yourself, and you don't see the movement that you wanted. Maybe it's mismet expectations. That could be an issue. Maybe there's variables within that space that, as as well as anyone, that can influence that. Like maybe you're stepping on the scale after you had a bunch of water.
Sure.
You just chugged a liter, 2 liters. You haven't used the bathroom for a while.
Yeah.
All of those variables can come into play, and then you don't end up meeting your objective. Well, the patience is trusting that process to say, I've done my homework, I've done everything right to figure out the plan of attack in order for me to achieve these goals. Now, I do think if you set forth some plan on that mission, and you've created your long-term goal, you've created micro short-term goals, that can be valuable, because you can create some sort of like line in the sand. And that can help with that tension where it's like, okay, if I don't see results by this time based off of this information, which seems to be accurate, then, okay, so up to a point, I'm going to be patient. And then I'm going to say, okay, we might have to go back to the drawing board.
Right. Yeah, the health and fitness example is an interesting one, because in terms of losing weight, it's well studied. There's an established evidence as to how to get from point A to point B in that sphere.
Yeah.
But in all cases in life, we're not necessarily going to have that readily available to us.
Yeah.
So you have an outcome in mind, but you might not necessarily have all of the steps to get there.
Yes.
So, for me, as I'm going through this currently, I know it's going to work. And so the patience that I am affording the process is a little passive in a way, because
Sure.
I know I'm going to get my outcome if I do everything properly. The hardest thing that I have to deal with right now in terms of my patience is also getting excited.
Yeah.
And so you start to get very excited about the outcome when you start seeing progress. And I think that can both make me more patient on some days and maybe less patient on other days. Because, if I'm seeing progress, I'm excited, I know it's working, it reinforces the process, patience grows.
Yeah.
Or I'm really excited about the outcome, it was a slower week, the scale didn't move.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm getting frustrated. What can I do differently? Do I need to change something? Do I drop my calories even more? Then I need to trust the evidence. I need to trust the science, my ability to adhere to the protocol, and just be patient. Just calm down.
So in this example, I think the way you described it is perfect, because there's a body of evidence. There's a lot of literature, studies. It's probably one of the most studied things that you can do.
Sure, it's up there.
That you can commit to, at an individual level. And so you have those things to lean on. But the other side is, the other part that you wrestle with is that you're ambitious, you're motivated, you're determined, you're all of these things. And when you have those things, you want results faster.
Sure.
Maybe that's a design feature, not a flaw. right? It moves us quicker towards our goal. It's sort of the fire underneath us. And that passion and those emotions are probably necessary to a degree, but they can also work against us when it's the wrong tool. This is the tool we need to deploy patience, not, the excited, highly motivated individual that wants immediate results. We come back down, realize objectively, okay, this isn't a scenario where immediate results is possible. I got to put that tool back. Sometimes we pull on a tool without realizing. All of a sudden we have it in our hand and we're like, shit, how did this get here? And that's, I'm as guilty of that as anybody. And that's why I said at the beginning, like, it's one of the things that I've had to work the most on personally, probably within my personal development, is patience. I've certainly gotten a lot better at it. It's something I'm proud of, but it's still something that I have to work at every day, because the ambitions that I have towards the goals that I've set for myself, I want to get there.
Sure, especially if you can see it or taste it.
Yes.
It's close, or it's at least within reach. You have the capacity for it. You're capable. You control the majority of variables, but there are still some uncontrolled.
Yeah, this is a terrible example, but I think everyone, if they reflect honestly, would understand this. When you have to go to the bathroom really bad, it's the closer you get to the bathroom, the more dangerous it is that you need to get there on time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of us have been through that scenario. And it's quite similar to that. It's like our body knows, like, we're almost at the finish line.
Right. Something I wanted to touch on is something patience requires. And I think patience requires this, whether it's a personal goal, a broad goal, if it's patience you're affording somebody else, is trust or belief. There has to be some undercurrent of either one of those two to allow for patience to be deployed in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think so. And the hard part is determining what your belief is in or your trust is in. And sometimes that's layered, right? So if you go back to this example, there's, for you, if I'm sort of diagnosing at a distance, like your scenario, and what I know of you, you're going to trust within yourself that you're going to do the research. So what you've uncovered, I know that you can trust. The research is done. It's there. I can set all of these things up, so you can trust in that within yourself. There's another layer, is that the evidence that you find, can you trust the people who did the work to uncover that evidence as being accurate?
Sure.
Ironically, in this space, there's that joke of, like, every how many years in the nutrition fitness space, evidence changes. Because if you were doing what you're doing right today, everyone would say, oh, eggs are the best for you to eat. And you'd be like, yeah, amazing. If this was 15 years ago, you'd be like, only egg whites.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
People can still differ.
Low carb, high carb.
Yeah.
At least we know protein's important regardless.
Yeah, right? Everyone can agree on that.
Yeah. There's an interesting paradox in that, which is the reason why I afford myself so much patience during the research process is because, on the whole, I think I'm probably more of an impatient person when it comes to not wanting to waste my time.
Beautiful.
So if I don't afford myself that research time, or at least a level of assurance or trust or belief in what I'm doing is correct, I don't want to get a couple months in and I haven't moved the needle, and then I've wasted so much time. I'm going to be even more impatient and maybe do some more radical things to get the result that I'm looking for. It's not necessarily grounded. So it's better for me to be patient up front in that I'm slow and deliberate in trying to get to the bottom of what I think will work, and then that foundation of evidence helps allow me to be more patient throughout the duration of the process towards that goal.
Yeah, and that's kind of
a very long-winded way of saying that, but
yeah, that's where it's a little bit ironic for people when they act impatient. Is if your evidence says 6 months from now you're going to achieve your goal, So I don't know what 6 months from now is, but like, let me pick an arbitrary date, August 1st.
Right.
I used to think about this in like some of my goal setting, but in this case, okay, August 1st, there's nothing you can do to stop that day from coming.
Sure.
August 1st is going to show up. The only things you can control between now and August 1st is how committed you are to the objective.
Right.
And any deviation from that means that August 1st, the outcome might not be what you want it to be. So, and that's true of like almost anything you're pursuing. You set forth a date, you create a plan, and that day is coming. Every time you deviate from that plan because of impatience, not because it was necessary, which is adaptability, we'll talk about that next week, but because you were impatient, the further that timeline is going to extend on trying to attain your objective. And so August 1st is still going to show up. It's just on that day when you wake up, you're just not going to be what you were expecting.
Yeah.
Your objective won't be met.
Sure.
Almost certainly. And so, yeah, it's quite ironic. I used to think about that for like, a military course to get through a hard time. It was like, okay, graduation of said course is on this day.
Right.
That day's showing up. The only thing I can control is whether I'm walking across the stage on parade
Sure.
or not. But that day's showing up.
I think purpose plays into it as well, in that, and we can pull back to the example about me, which is I haven't set any time constraints on this.
Okay.
I'm already married. I don't have any special event I'm trying to get fit for.
Sure.
I'm doing it for myself. So there's also a level of trust in my ability to assess when I think enough is enough. I don't have like I said, no deadline. I'm not going based on number. It's purely based on a visual. Am I happy with where I'm at? And then obviously I'm going to be doing blood work with my physician as well to make sure my markers are within range. That's primary. But in terms of body composition goals, it's not like, oh, I need to be 175 pounds by this date. So there's a nuanced version of patience in there too, in that I don't know what the end date is going to be, which means the end date could be very far away. And I know I'm going to have to dig in and do this for longer than maybe I could have ever imagined.
Right. So this is not patience towards the goal. It's the patience you're willing to apply towards how fast you achieve it. Right. So like you've not set, it's different in that you've not set a goal and said, okay, by this date, if I follow these things. And so it's not patience of I'm sticking to the plan. It's patience that I will achieve this outcome and I'm willing to be patient as to when that is.
That's right.
This is the plan. This is how I will achieve it. When that day comes, I'm okay with whenever that is.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, that can be a very positive thing. I know for a number of people that could also be fairly problematic.
Sure.
Because if there's no definite end, then you don't necessarily know what you're working towards, or you need to reduce the notion of what you're working towards. Mine is kind of broad. It's a better body composition.
Yeah.
I haven't decided in full what that means yet. Is it single-digit body fat? Is it simply being able to see my abs, being able to feel better, run better, have better blood markers, etc.? It's not been predetermined. I just know that currently I'm losing weight, and I'm doing so in a slow-ish and controlled way. And I will continue until I get the result that I want. I know where I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the end state is. And to be fair, there's no true end state because I get to live presumably another 60 years. So there's going to be ebbs and flows in that body composition until I kick the old bucket.
I think that's if we're sticking with the topic of fitness, nutrition, healthy lifestyle, I think that's actually the most mature approach to it. And when I think about my experience with injury, which I wasn't expecting that this would be a topic on this particular episode, but one of the largest challenges for me was that because of my injury, my body, mind, things changed. And I had to adapt. So this will probably be in the next episode. I had to adapt to those changes. And so maybe this is a case for adaptation coming before patience. But I'll talk about the patience piece more specifically, because on my fitness journey, I was very goal orientated. It was either for athletics, and so I wanted to achieve certain goals because of performance results on the other end, or it was being measured in the military and I wanted to perform, and they were measuring my output and performance. And so that was my focus. Then I'm in this injury phase, recovery phase, and adapting to my sort of new way of life and how my body works and so forth. And performance was kind of off the table. That adjustment was really, really challenging. And it also became really challenging to try and set sort of like rigid constraints around my fitness. Because what I had to do was start to learn more about my body and read how it's feeling each day, and then work on the thing that was feeling okay. And if I woke up and I was like, I'd like to go for a long walk, or I'd like to try running a couple kilometers very slowly. But as the day went on and I get to the gym or something, I'm like, can't be today. And then so I would have to be patient with that process and say, okay, I'm just going to listen to my body and I'm going to do something else.
Right.
And so maybe this makes the case for adapting, being on the other side. Through my patience, I adapted to whatever that scenario was. Moving from cardio to working on my upper body, or vice versa. And that level of patience, where it's sort of unknown rather than fixed, committed to a particular outcome, I think is a little bit harder. It's more akin to the parenting or business one that we talked about in the overview, where it's like there's not a ton of feedback loops, not a ton of input or data maybe informing you. You're just hoping that I'm on the right path, I'm making the best decisions, and so forth. But then if I revert back to my scenario, the thing I realized that I had to eventually contend with was, where's the cognitive dissonance coming in? Is this me being patient, or is this me being sort of coming up with a really great excuse? Maybe you shouldn't work on this today.
Sure.
It's probably not going to be good for your body. Is that truly me being patient and reading my body accurately? Or is that me having some cognitive dissonance and just not wanting to?
Sure.
So it becomes a new thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I can understand that component too. My injuries have not been as significant as yours, but every year goes by, we get a little older. You and I aren't old men yet, but we can't train like we did when we were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And so there is a degree of auto-regulation and intuition when I'm in the gym. I know my body well enough. Yesterday I was doing squats. I wanted a fourth set. On my first rep of that fourth set, I felt a little twinge in my glute. I probably could have finished it, but I killed it because the risk reward wasn't there for me.
Yes.
And I want to pull the risk reward into patience, broadly speaking, because as you said, it's not a passive thing. You need to currently be evaluating or regulating in a way and using feedback to determine whether or not you continue to deploy that patience.
Hold on, can I pause you there quickly?
Of course.
So I think that's a really good example of like the grit versus patience. Grit would say, like, suck it up, get it done. And patience says, pay attention. We might have to adapt here.
Yeah, and again, it plays into my impatience in a way, in that I choose to auto-regulate and make those decisions, and I feel I do so intelligently. But because if I did injure myself, I would be set back again.
Yeah.
And then I'm playing with a dynamic.
Yeah. That's where I think like levels of maturity comes into play.
Sure.
And so this is actually, I'm completely, we're workshopping this, but like, is there a reason that, often younger people, I'm sure there's like tons of different mechanisms baked into this, but I think about myself as a soccer player, right? If I was to get injured, I would, in my younger days, I would play through it. I don't know, figure it out after. But because I did that, I was also able to build a level of grit and resilience.
Sure.
Now, had I only remained objective, been patient and said, feedback loop, no, I'm going to come off. Would I have had enough scenarios to build a sufficient amount of grit that I at least have it developed as a tool in the toolbox?
Right. The answer is a gigantic, broad, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because you were heavily invested in your athletic career. I was not in any way, shape, or form. And yet I was still able to cultivate that elsewhere.
Sure.
We all have diverse backgrounds and a range of experiences where we can be afforded the opportunity to exhibit or learn those things, which is part of the thesis of this book, and it's a tremendous thing. So, maybe. Again, there's also the what if of getting injured too, and pushing through that.
Yeah.
But I would say that, there's not always a physical consequence when it comes to deciding whether or not you're being gritty about something.
Totally.
But in that particular example, sure, you could have kept yourself from that opportunity. However, if you consider where you've ended up today, it's highly likely you would have cultivated it elsewhere.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because that reminds me of our last conversation, which was exactly that for parents, you don't have to push through every gritty scenario, because you can build it in other ways. And so that's a perfect reminder.
Sure. We're afforded daily opportunities, regardless of discipline or context, to exhibit any of the given virtues that we've spoken about, unless you're staying at home meditating. But even then, you're fighting the inner demons, so I'm sure there's a level of patience happening there as well.
Totally.
But all to say, these things can be found just about anywhere. You just need to be aware of them first and foremost, and then seek to develop them.
Yeah. And that's a perfect reminder. We were talking about this, I think, after the last episode we did, which is that in some of the experiences we talk about, there's some novelty, which is kind of cool and great, but it makes it interesting because they're novel.
Yeah.
But it takes away from the core message, which is that these things are represented every single day in the smallest things that we do. And that's kind of where we want to focus on them. I think I use this example with my children where we have, so this is going to play into two things. One is like some of the grit and lessons learned in very small places, and then a parent's patience in the development of this. So I often I'm talking to my kids, they don't want to eat something, and I remind them over and over again, so I'm certain we've talked about this, to be okay with doing something they don't want to do, which is to eat a food that they don't necessarily want to eat because the outcome is positive.
Right.
It's a good food. That's what's on your plate. Someone worked hard to afford that, to harvest it,
sure,
to cut it, to prepare it, all of that. You can eat it even if it's a little bit hard to do so. And so there's a patience in trying to teach some of those things that you have to deploy as a parent, as well as just to get through the meal in of itself.
Yeah.
And the other day, my oldest son says to my youngest son when he wasn't going to eat something, he basically parroted exactly that. And earlier that day, he hadn't done something. And so I explained to him what a hypocrite was.
Okay.
and he understood it. It actually was meaningful. His comprehension's rather high for his age. And so we talked about that. And so like I had to deploy a level of patience to be like, not go off the hinge like, what are you criticizing him for when you just did the same thing and I just fought with you over the thing?
Yeah.
But the patience had to be deployed because this is a beautiful teaching moment. And so, I had to put myself in check, be patient, and the outcome ended up being really great. Like I said, his comprehension was high, and so he got it. And it actually was meaningful downstream because the next time he had to do something, I reminded him that you think this is important. You talk to your brother. You were being a great big brother, and you were reminding him of that. But if you want to take that leadership role, you have to make sure before you say it, you do it yourself first. And so, anyways, it turned out to be this beautiful moment, but it required a lot of patience.
Sure.
Long day at work, dynamics, the house is a mess, trying to get food. Someone doesn't want to eat the food that you've prepared. Cutting up peppers is such a pain in the ass. My kids happen to love peppers, so like the last thing you want to prepare is nice little slices of peppers so they can get healthy food on their plate. After a long day's work,
Sure.
been on the phone with someone from work after the fact. Once you got home, things are chaotic. Patience.
Sure.
And the patience afforded a wonderful opportunity to teach a really valuable lesson. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting sort of circle.
I'm missing a point, or the point in a way, but it is interesting how even with grown individuals, you don't always think through the entire supply chain that got that dinner to your plate, or all of the inputs that were required. So just wanted to leave that and express some gratitude for life broadly, and for people just being able to show up and do what has to be done in order to keep society moving. It's a pretty interesting thing.
It really is. And I think it's sort of the frustration of all of a sudden in those moments when you have to deploy patience in the face of that frustration. But all these variables start, it's like a reminder.
Yeah.
Like when things are good, you don't see the variables. But when you're flustered because you've had so much output towards it and you're like, this child needs to learn something from this. Okay, now all of a sudden you're thinking about all the variables. And to your point, if I didn't have kids right now, I probably wouldn't have had the moment of pause and reflection to think about exactly that. Yeah. Everything it took to get that one pepper onto his plate and just start working backwards from that.
Sure.
From the moment I cut it, washed it, all the resources necessary to do that.
Everything that went into raising you as an individual.
Yep.
And on and on and on.
Yes.
Yeah. I believe on this podcast, I have already expressed that the worst version of myself is when I'm behind the driver's seat of a car, or in the driver's seat rather.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting example too, because I do deploy a level of patience to keep myself nice and calm. It doesn't always work, but the opposite of having patience in those positions doesn't serve me. So I just wanted to flag that down as well, in that you mentioned that patience sits with the absence of progress, like sitting in traffic, an absence of progress. But I think on a level, it sits regardless of progress.
Yeah, I think so. I had an example in my mind for that, and so now I'm trying to contradict it based on that. Let's workshop it, and we'll see if it contradicts it. So, the patience that I lack when I'm behind the driver's seat sometimes, it's and I've thought about this so much through all of my hours of driving.
Sure.
It's not the action that somebody does. I think it's the undercurrent. And obviously that's broadly the topic of transferable everything is the undercurrents. And it's a recognition that somebody is doing something from a place that I feel like we should be past. So for example, a lot of people I'm sure will feel that when they're driving, somebody is being inconsiderate. As a society, I feel like we should be past that of being inconsiderate. We should have adapted. So we should have progressed beyond people being inconsiderate. We share the road. There's rules for the road for reasons, and it's to be a shared space and to not impede each other on our way to our objectives,
Right.
wherever that may be. And recognizing that, if you're in the far left lane just cruising, that's not what that's for. There's people around you. It might be easier for you because you can put on cruise control. That's not what the lane's for. It's for passing. And so you're being inconsiderate and you're impeding people on their way to do whatever they're doing. So the undercurrent is you're not being considerate of everyone else. You're thinking only of me and not everyone else around you. Now, to contradict my own thinking there, I also recognize that everyone has complexities within their lives, and maybe they're not being inconsiderate in that moment. Maybe something terrible has happened and they're not thinking clearly within their lives.
Yeah.
And we forget to consider the complexity of those things, and that's where patience can really serve us in a scenario like that. Not just so we don't react poorly, but there's also a good reason why we shouldn't react poorly.
Yeah.
Which is because if I'm concerned about someone being not being considerate, it's not considerate of me to apply intent that I know nothing about.
Right.
And so I appreciate that as well. And so then I'm being the hypocrite. And I'm pointing something out that I'm being in of myself. And so in order for me to remain consistent with my values, stay in alignment, another topic down the road, that's critically important. And so patience then too becomes deploying patience gives us the ability to take a step back, think objectively, and see things for as they are, not as our emotions or our immediate responses pretend we're seeing.
Right. In that example, I would argue that we are reacting to a situation and not to an individual. Using your other people on the road example.
I respond to the individual.
So let me elaborate. So I think it's what I was trying to get at when we opened the conversation when I was asking how can we categorize versions of patience. So you can have patience for a situation or patience for an individual, and that's what I'm going to tie it back to.
Okay.
The situation is that I'm driving and I'm responding to other drivers. We've spoken at length about notions of character and reputation. I'm reacting to drivers. I don't know these individuals. So I can't really afford those individuals' patience in the way I would in, say, a business scenario, which is what I want to tie things back to. If I'm affording an individual patience, like I said earlier, there needs to be a level of belief or a level of trust that I'm going to be, or they are going to be, working towards an outcome that I have determined. So there's a risk analysis that's happening. Are they going to hit that goal? Are they going to develop the way that I think that they're going to develop? Is it going to happen with an appropriate time frame? Am I being honest about what that time frame is? It's effectively a form of an investment. My patience is investing in an individual, believing that they are going to reach a certain outcome because I've afforded them the time to do so. Now, obviously, you have to take other things into account. The context matters significantly. What's the operational status of the department they're working in, financial status, et cetera? How much time can I afford them? And that's why I say there's a level of honesty that needs to be afforded in that assessment. And to further add, that assessment needs to be regular. Simply going back to patience is not necessarily passive because evidence and data inform the level of patience I afford a scenario.
Right.
In a car, I'm not I can't coach the other drivers. To be fair, I'm in no position to coach other drivers. So I don't necessarily think I'm getting mad at them. I'm more getting mad at what I feel their intention is, but I have no way of knowing what their intention is outside of that individual wants to get to their destination as bad as I do.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Now, the question I would have for you then is, do you ever get mad at the system that allowed a driver to exist?
Yes.
Okay.
But that is one of a large number of systems that frustrate me.
Sure.
And in saying that, I exhibit a monstrous level of patience every day by default because of those systems I don't always agree with.
Yes, and that's perfect.
But I have no choice but to exist within them.
Yeah.
So do I live in resentment and be non-productive about it? Or can I choose the things that I forget or suffer through in order to get the results I want?
Perfect. That's exactly where I was hoping you were going to go with that. That's awesome. And that's exactly it. Is so you've carved out the patience for the individual. There's things that you just don't have context. Patience for the system, because the only other option is to live in resentment. And then where I guess you wanted to go with it on the business side in the workplace and so forth is that you can set some goals of expectations for someone, be patient with them because you have more context, because you know them.
Sure.
You can set forth your own expectations on that journey.
Yeah, it's research in motion.
Yeah.
You know, you're receiving a lot of feedback, a lot of input. Now, sometimes that's coming from hard data, sometimes that's coming from feedback from other managers or other people, and I still have to do my due diligence to find what I believe to be the most objective truth. But with that said, I use all of that information to inform the level of patience I have when it comes to somebody developing or being situated on any given task. Are they excelling here greatly and they're slowly moving here? Then certainly I can afford patience if it's in line with operational and financial goals.
You said something that's really important, I think, and that you're seeking the truth. And so you're getting feedback, you're getting data, but you have to deploy patience on your journey to find what's true. And that goes back to the objectives. So your first objective, and we've talked about this before, is to discover what's true, whatever that may be. And so on that journey, you're deploying patience. So instead of responding immediately because a manager gave you a particular set of feedback or the first two data points that you've stumbled on are telling you one thing. Instead of responding to that, because you understand contextually that there's going to be more data and that there's things you just don't know, you have to leave that bit of room, then you can deploy the patience, or that's the importance of deploying the patience to allow all of the data to come in because your end goal is whatever the truth may be. Not to move something forward, first to discover what's true. You solve problem one by figuring out what's true. And then everything after that, second, third, fourth order of effects can be solved for. Conversely, if you only respond to the first two data points, you may not find what's actually true. You don't solve the problem ultimately. And I think we talked about this on the last episode. And then second, third, fourth order effects fall by the wayside simply because you lacked the patience to allow the data to, the information to come in. Now, there was one point in there that I think was really interesting because if we go back to parenting or being a business leader, oftentimes you're making decisions and you're trying to progress things forward without having feedback loop mechanisms, without having a ton of data. A lot of it is just kind of a hope, a prayer, a belief that the things that you're doing are
and the
true.
constraints are different.
There are certain feedback mechanisms that you can look at, little hints that you're moving things in the right direction, but nothing obvious that necessarily sticks out at you. And I think this kind of ties into a bit of a critique that we've talked about numerous times with like the formal educational process. I would also extend that to the athletic space. I'll give an example. My son that I was just sharing the story about, he's very intelligent. His cognitive processing power is insane, and his comprehension beautiful. He doesn't stop talking. But at 2, I might have shared this story. But at 2, we had gone to our doctor, and she looks at the chart. How many words, independent words, does he have? He should have, I don't know, 20, let's say. I can't remember the exact number. And we're like, no, he doesn't have 20. He's got 15, something. Okay, well, that doesn't meet our chart. And so you're going to need a speech therapist. And, you know, I'm a skeptic when it comes to these sort of like structured chart, cookie cutter type things. It doesn't matter that it's a doctor that said it or a teacher or something. You know, I just had a lot of questions. Obviously, no time to get answers. So I was looking for them myself. This doesn't seem to make sense to me because, again, just like athletics, I've seen so many times players develop much later than others. I recall in physical development, people developing later than others. So why wouldn't that extend to the brain, to cognition? And so I started to do some research, and I was like, oh, it absolutely does. Of course, that makes complete sense. But anyways, we spoke to a speech therapist. First thing they said was, when did he start walking? He started walking early, 10 months. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about. Kids who start to walk early, let's say, often lag behind in their vocabulary. Their whole mind is like, it's this one new thing that they're doing, and it's requiring a lot of cognitive load to put into walking. So he's more advanced here, so he might fall a little bit behind the curve here. And she's like, you don't need to work with us. If a year or 2 later, he's struggling so significantly, he's behind the ball.
Yeah.
And I was like, that makes so much sense. Thank you for being so honest. And now he doesn't stop talking. Like, does not stop talking. And it's wonderful. But it's just like, for a parent, we've set all these like predetermined stages of development.
Yeah.
Really, that's just based on averages. It's based on so many things. And so you might have some feedback mechanisms, but you do have to look deeper. And just like in that scenario. So if you're trying to achieve X and your child's not quite there, but they're higher in other areas. So it's the real world version of the bar graph I keep going back to.
Yeah.
He's excelling here, he's a little behind here. That's okay. But as long as they're moving in a positive direction, it's progress.
Yeah.
I think as long as you're making progress, apply patience.
Sure.
Relax. Don't hurry to the finish line, because there is no finish line if we consider Simon Sinek's infinite game. It doesn't exist. The name of the game is to keep playing the game.
Sure.
And so I think that's important. And like I said, the same is true for athletics. I mean, I was, without question, a late developer as a soccer player. Like, without question, far behind my peers. I was able to stay with them because of other areas that I was able to, hold at a higher standard, like, say, my IQ or on the pitch, my ability to read the game as it's unfolding, versus, say, my first touch. My distribution was strong. My first touch, or my ability to take a player on one-on-one, lagged way behind.
Right.
But the other ones were high enough sufficiently that I could still play at the level I was playing at with my peers. Once the rest started to catch up, that was the accelerant behind it. And I think the same thing is true, but it's hard to see. And so, like, I think that's also why patience is such an important tool in athletics. If your child is playing any sport, really, and you think that they're too far behind at 11 years old, you're completely mistaken. There's so much time for them to continue to develop.
Yeah.
Those are not indicators in any way, shape, or form of whether or not they'll be successful. 11, 12 years old. These are development ages.
Yeah.
And so I think, to kind of close it off, is that's the same thing that is in part my frustration at times with the education system, things like that. We only care about if you can understand algebra and pass the tests, the predetermined tests, within a certain period of time. If you can't get it in 4 weeks when we have that test, then we measure you based on that. But if you get it 2 weeks later, it doesn't matter. It's of no consequence.
Sure.
Whereas in reality, it is. That's really great. Congratulations, you've nailed it. That matters in the world. But how it's calculated and evaluated is only based on a preset criteria.
Right.
So if we only evaluated the success of an athlete or someone's intellect based on the same criteria that my son had, then they'd be like, well, your son's way behind. He's not going to amount to anything. When really it was just some patience.
Sure.
That's all we needed.
And to be fair, this isn't a counter. It's just me sharing
Please, yeah.
experience. It's simply that I was afforded a good deal of patience in school on some levels. And
Sure.
on other levels, I, of course, was not afforded any patience at all.
Yeah.
But shout out to Miss Fu. I didn't understand algebra. I was garbage at mathematics. And I was failing her class. And she gave me every extra credit opportunity under the sun, would meet with me after school to help me figure out the things that I couldn't figure out. And I am certain she was exhibiting a massive amount of patience with me. But she cared.
Wonderful.
And, I didn't land in a field where I need to utilize mathematics heavily. And, we have tools that we can leverage to help us with certain things. Depending on the age of the listener, I'm sure you heard in school, you're not always going to have a calculator on you. Well, surprise, surprise. I've got one on my wrist. I've got one in my pocket, and so on. But yeah, certainly, I won't pretend to understand the school system or why it works or why it's set up the way it is, but there's a level of bureaucracy and
Sure.
systematizing and so forth just to get people through from point A to point B, to get them to a certain level.
Yep.
Can we have designer education that's publicly funded? Maybe a different conversation and not for today. But I certainly give huge props to the teachers and the education professionals in the system who do care and who do afford the patience to help bring people up where otherwise you might be left and you fall back, and that changes the trajectory of your life.
Totally. Teachers who care matter.
Sure.
Deeply. And, I'm fortunate my kids have teachers that clearly care. So I'm not saying I didn't have any, and
Sure.
My critique is always broad. But I guess more of the point is, okay, so it's one thing to critique something. There needs to be solutions. We've talked about that in the nature of schooling and the formal school system. But to sort of add to that, because it's in line with this, is my encouragement for parents, because that's where everything ends. If, regardless of what happens in the school system, whether it changes and adapts to today, it doesn't, they listen to, it's not that they're my critiques. There's a lot of people that critique the system in the same way. None of it actually matters. If the parents understand and they're just patient with their children. Because if you as the parent can recognize that, then you can support them, allow them to sort of move through the world, not just at their pace, in terms of like, yeah, well, they can kind of just bumble along as they do. Still, you have to encourage them, of course, forward,
Yeah.
and to work hard and do all the deploy all the other virtues that we're talking about. But you can be patient in your approach in that, you know what, if they don't get accepted into university right out of high school because their grades sucked because of how they were being tested and evaluated, and it's just not how they learn. And there's nothing wrong with them going to school, work for a couple years, and then applying as a mature student. Reading some books. Now I actually feel great. I'm confident in the classroom. I'm ready to go. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure. And it's goal driven.
Right.
You know, I have peers my age who are seeking additional education now because it's going to inform their career.
Totally. I've gone back to school. You know, I was in my early mid 30s. I went back to school on Saturdays for firefighting. Same formal institution. I had to sit there.
Sure.
I was measured in the same way, same tests, like all of that kind of stuff. And so I was able to do that because my objective was greater than my dissatisfaction for the thing I was doing. So that's kind of the grit component.
Yeah. But it brings us back to the all-powerful intention.
Yeah. And I think that's why, if we go back to the grit component, I think that's why Angela Duckworth captures that so perfectly, is because you need a purpose behind what you're doing to deploy the grit. But I think maybe to the point that you're trying to bring is that you also need that same intention, that same sense of purpose for patience.
Sure. I also want to throw this into the mix and see where it lands, which is the importance of something can change, and the individual gets to determine the level of importance of a thing or to change it at their will. There's contextual constraints, but like broadly speaking, I'm just throwing out the idea, which is that situations have stakes.
Right.
So what are the consequences, or what are the positive or negative outcomes of this thing? How important is it to me? I can change my mind on that anytime I want. I know that can be a bad thing because you can fall into the negative patterns that we've discussed previously. But through enough self-reflection and analysis of a situation or anything broadly, you can decide how important a thing is to you.
Completely.
In a moment, I can decide whether or not anything has any significance to me.
Sure.
And whether or not that's a positive thing, we can talk about, but you can leverage that as a tool to be more patient in scenarios where you can leverage patience strategically. And so I want to kind of bring the conversation into conflict resolution or heated exchanges, and maybe tie patience into stoicism in a way, in that you can afford an individual or even a situation patience where the stakes are very high for you, but the outcome of the conversation informs the direction in which you go towards that ultimate outcome.
Yeah, I think that actually goes back to the same thing that we were talking about earlier, which is that you're outcome orientated, and if the outcome you desire is the truth, regardless of what the truth is, then you can deploy the patience. So if it's conflict resolution, do you want to be right?
Right.
Do you want the other what's the outcome you want? Most people want to be right. They want to be, well, the first thing I thought of that I, spoke about, that has to be right. I've already said it. My identity's on the line now. I can't be wrong. But if the thing you want is just what's true, whether it's the first thing you said, whether it's the thing that you said, that it's immaterial. It's just what's true. It's one of the things to bring in the Stoicism. I think that's one of the beautiful things about philosophy, like a true philosopher, is just seeking what's true. That's often what they're looking for. Especially, I was doing this course on the Peterson Academy thing, and it's a course on Aristotle. And that was one of the things I was listening to. I was listening to it this morning while I was at the gym. And I just thought that was a really beautiful approach for philosophies. It's just exploring what's true. Who I am, whether I've said something or not, is It's not about me. It's just about the truth. And so you get to kind of remove yourself from that as well. There's a comfort in that, I would say, because once you've decoupled yourself from the things you've said, the ideas you've had, people say, well, like, I'm not married to my ideas and stuff. And that's a good way of looking at it. It's just, I'm completely decoupled from those things. Only what's true.
Sure.
And I'm just sort of like an archaeologist.
Right.
I'm patiently exploring, looking for what that is. And then in conflict resolution, if you're also the one in conflict, then you also might require something of you. I might have to apologize.
Right.
That's hard too, because now your identity is back tied into that.
Right.
But if it's just what's true, if you're the one at fault,
Sure.
you're the one at fault. That's okay. Apologize. But we also don't leave a lot of room for forgiveness. Another topic for later.
Yeah.
And so there is a societal dynamic there, something that I'm very critical of, probably maybe more critical than I am of the school system, is that within society we've removed a lot of that forgiveness component. That's why a lot of people struggle to say sorry
Right.
or are willing to be wrong, because we don't leave room for that.
Sure. But thought experiment is to position yourself in the boardroom right now,
Okay.
and you have a disagreement with somebody,
Okay.
and you do know the truth,
Okay.
and they are unwavering in their approach.
Okay.
Can you deploy patience strategically to work through that to still get your result?
Yes.
And you can do so in the same way, say, on the pitch, as a coach and as a player?
No.
Connect the two for me.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so on the pitch, I think because everything's happening faster, and so there's a lot more emotion that exists there. Sort of like your body and mind are at a higher state. You're moving quicker. If I'm afforded a little bit of room to breathe for a second, or there's, it's not a close game or something, then yes. But when it's high intense, very close game, we're doing everything we can to try and win. It's a lot harder. Just body and mind, my nervous system's at at peak, and so I find that harder.
So take that same energy,
Yeah.
and put that into the boardroom. It's a decision that needs to be made soon. There needs to be alignment with the team.
Sure.
I think you can employ patience in your approach depending on what your level of authority is.
Yes,
But
that's what I was going to get
That
to.
also plays into having a stoic approach to that and people management broadly. But certainly there are going to be scenarios where you simply can't have the patience you might want to have because of the stakes.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's important. And I think that's where it does connect to the pitch, because, if it was as open-ended as you recently or you just stated, then it's kind of like, okay, it's an infinite game. I can deploy patience. The outcome is the outcome whenever the outcome happens. On the pitch, it's a finite game. The game's done in 5 minutes. We need to score. The intensity, that increases the level of intensity. Now, if in the boardroom, hey, we have something that has to, this outcome has to happen, or it can materially change our position, our scenario as a business, then the game might be infinite, but the scenario is finite. And so I think understanding those things. So I think you set a line in the sand. I'm going to deploy patience up to a point, but once we reach that point, patience can't exist anymore because the outcome is necessary. And that goes kind of back to the beginning. I think I mentioned that. Like I think that's part of that objective goal setting.
Yeah.
Is so you leave the room for the patience to exist.
Yep.
And then, okay, it's a point of no return. I've done everything I can, but it's no longer sort of, it's controllables and uncontrollables. Up to a certain point, I can control that. After that, there's nothing I can do. The outcome must prioritize everything else. And so that's the case. So it's in the boardroom, it would be the equivalent, assuming you're the one who has authority in the moment, to say, okay, team, I want to achieve alignment. This is the objective. This is what I think we need to do. I'm open for some feedback. Let's work on this. Let's workshop it, whatever. I'm open to alternative ideas. Here's the foundation. And maybe you're right. They're wrong. You haven't given them enough context. So you're patient because you know that you have more information. If you're in the position of authority in that scenario, you probably have more data points than they do. So you want to help extend as many of those as you possibly can. So you know that whatever they're offering is the most informed offering they can give you. And then after a certain point, that's when it has to turn into a bit of a dictatorship.
Sure.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time, but we're going to have to move forward with this. That's a hard thing for someone else to accept. And this is why team management is so challenging, whether it's athletics or within business. Because if you're the coach, you're managing the goals and objectives of the team amongst individuals who are trying to put that in their order of priority. However, they also have their own objectives that they want to achieve. So if you're a soccer coach, you have the objective of the team, and that might mean a player sitting on the bench longer than you would like them to, but it's what's best for the team in the moment, in the tactics in this game. Well, that's going to conflict with their objective. Even if they want the team to do well, they also need to develop. And if they're not playing, they're not developing. So now your two incentive structures are in conflict. Same in business. I want the business to do well. Hopefully everyone on the team wants the business to do well, but they also want to perform. They want to show that they can be right, that they can have authority in a situation, that their decisions matter, because the likelihood that leads to a promotion, monetary increase, those things are connected. And so their personal objectives are also in conflict.
That is heavy.
It is. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to consider.
Sure.
But obviously in my position, it's something I sit with quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I try my best to deploy patience. I'm probably actually, even though I said it's something I have to work on the most, as a leader in a business, it's probably the thing I'm criticized for the most.
So I'm
being overly patient.
That is what I wanted to steer the conversation towards, and not even a comment or a critique of your leadership style, but ultimately, and I guess no, because it's
okay.
I have nothing critical to say about patience. I actually think it's quite strategic. I prefer that over other possible ways of approaching things, at least within business.
Sure.
I don't want to have a screaming match with somebody. I would rather hear them out. And if that means I have to sit through something that I've heard before or that I disagree with, whatever. It means I get to ask questions, I get to seek clarification, and maybe I can help find a common understanding. However, to your point, patience, different words than you, but can maybe be perceived as weakness instead of being something that's strategic or worth leveraging. I don't know how or where else to take this. I kind of just wanted to have some commentary on it, in that just because somebody's exhibiting something for like patience, you need to appreciate that while it may be because they're a pushover or they're weak, that's not the only reason why somebody exhibits patience in a scenario. There's, particularly at the leadership level, there's a lot of strategy that goes into utilizing some of these things. Or for an athlete, for example.
Yeah, and it can be strategy. It can also be just, sometimes for me, if the moments that I'm critiqued with it the most, and when I'm critiqued with it, it's a fair critique. right? But in order for me to have not been patient in that scenario, I would have had to move out of alignment with my values. And that wasn't worth the trade-off. So for example, if someone's underperforming, you have to deploy a level of patience to help them get to where you hope they can be. And when someone gets there, that can be very beneficial to an organization and to a team. When they don't get there, you're often left sitting there thinking, I should have got rid of them earlier. I should have cut them from the team. I should have, packaged them out, whatever the case may be. The problem is that you have to have the humility to know that even though you're seeing certain patterns, there's still a lot that you don't know. So the part of the patience is leaving room to be wrong. So I might see someone underperforming and I need to deploy the patience to know that I could be wrong. It could be because of other reasons that I don't know about. And so I'm going to be patient with them and see if they can get there. And when they do, it's great. When they don't, you feel like you've wasted time. But if you get rid of everybody in an effort to not waste time, then you lose the upside of someone that can be really great for your team. Or if you only do it based on what you think and you close that gap where there's no room where I could be wrong in my observation, then that has other consequences. Your ego, you're not being in alignment because I'm not treating people equally. I'm treating people only as I feel I should respond to them or based on what my observations are.
Right.
And I'm not always right.
Sure.
I might be right a lot of the time, but and so sometimes like early stage business, maybe that's better. You have to move quicker. So you need to just go with like, if you're right 90% of the time, the 10% you're wrong, that's fine. When you're a bit more of like building or sustaining a team and everyone's looking for sets of values, long-term consistency, building a career somewhere. If they think that you're too erratic or your ego's out of control and you're not leaving room to be wrong and that shows up in those things, that's going to make the team very uneasy.
Sure.
It's going to be like, okay, I'm afraid to do something wrong because if I'm seen as an underperformer, then, I could be gone.
Yeah.
And so then everyone's walking on eggshells. Maybe people are hiding mistakes that they might have been more forthcoming with. That has huge consequences downstream. And so there's so many things tied into that, I think. And so based on most scenarios outside of maybe the early days of a startup business, I think it's better just to be patient, be wrong, be okay with having wasted some time because I couldn't replace them sooner because I wanted to deploy the same value, the same opportunity that I gave somebody else. It worked for that person. It didn't work for these next 5, but I was consistent.
Sure.
I was in alignment with who I am, my values, our values as an organization. And all of those, and I've not disrupted culture. I've not made people scared.
Sure.
All of those things matter more.
I'm paraphrasing the quote because I can't remember it verbatim, but something to the effect of no great thing is created in immediacy. I'm inclined to agree, obviously.
Yeah.
What I wanted to touch on is that there are many things of critical importance in life, and again, to business specifically, that take a lot of time and a lot of work in order to do properly.
Yeah.
So there has to be an undercurrent of patience to some degree.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that, like, off the back of your example, again, on the part of the employee, there has to be trust in leadership. In the same way leadership has to have trust in the employee. However, sometimes in order to get that or to get buy-in, there has to be a certain level of acceptable transparency, giving them the why to help build that trust, why I made this decision. Being transparent takes a lot of work. On top of like cognitive strategy, deciding what can or cannot be known or who should be in the know, the level of documentation or the software stack that you use to allow that level of access of information. It all takes a lot of work and time to get to a position like that. And maintenance as well is a nightmare. So all to say, in this particular example, and sorry, my brain is like shutting off.
No, you're okay.
So thank you for your patience. Patience is certainly necessary.
Yeah.
It's almost always there or required to be there. The individual just has the option of whether or not to listen to that.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the objectives. Like you can get somewhere a lot faster, whether it's business, whether it's a team, military, just by running a dictatorship. I'm not going to explain why and anything. We're just going to go. But there's nothing sustainable about it. That you can't sustain that because everything will erode over time. And so, you might find that easier, and it probably is. Like if you're the one that's in a position of authority, that's probably a lot easier, at least at the beginning, before things erode around you. So it's going to seem easier in the short term. I would argue in the long term that it would become harder because it can't be easy to rely on people when you can't trust them, not even a little bit, because everything's eroded. But in the short term, I can see why people would be swayed that way.
I mean, you can certainly burn brightly.
Sure, yeah.
However long you burn bright is the question.
Yeah. And so I think it's a matter of, it goes back to the truth thing. It's you have to find, to bring things back to the Stoics, you have to find the world as it is, not as you wish it was. And people are complex and people are part of the world. They live in it. They're part of your team. And so I find it hard when I have conversations with other executives or peers to be like, I don't actually have like a position on what I wish things were like in that scenario. Because they're not, and they can't change. People are people. Humans are humans. I don't get to control those things. And so it matters not how things are. It's or how I wish they were. It's just how they are. This is how it is, and I can only respond to it as it is. And so everything builds off of that. But it would be hard to deploy patience if you were constantly stuck in the tension between, hey, this is how things are, but it should be this way. I really wish it was. Example is, that's one of the tensions I find within the school system, is I really wish it was a different way,
right?
But it isn't. And I'm not very stoic about that.
Sure.
I'm not very patient about that, if I'm honest. In this capacity, I am. Because there's literally no way that can change. Yeah. Whereas I feel like there's a possibility, I have a hope of change there. It's people, it's dynamics. People are complex and they have things within their control and things beyond their control. And sometimes when we're evaluating those people, we see things within them that we think are within their control, and we might assume they are, but maybe they're not. Right? So there's so many layers that go so far back.
Yep.
And I think that's why for everybody, leaving room to be wrong is so important.
Yes.
You can be relatively certain on things. And I also think that the language is important. I was watching a lecture online, and it was a psychology lecture. And the person was speaking in like definitives. And I found it so hard because they weren't leaving in, at least from my opinion, enough room to be wrong. And if I was to give a critique, it would be that. And I think we need more of that. Say something. Based on my current understanding, I think X. So like even verbalizing the room to be wrong. I want that to be true for this.
Sure.
Everything we discuss can be wrong. It's entirely possible. These are only things we've observed and think are accurate and correct. And so I think leaving that room, that humility in not just in conversation, not just in our decisions, in our teaching, in everything we do.
Yeah, and that connects to my comment earlier about how you can just decide how important something is to you.
Yeah.
So in a moment, how important is it that I'm correct about something? And then on a more values-driven level for me, how important is it that I'm not wrong?
Right.
And I'm not singularly going to be able to figure that out. There's two people in a conversation. And if I enter into that so bullheaded that I'm unwilling to hear what they have to offer, and to be fair, I mean, even a criticism for myself, it could seem as though I'm exhibiting patience in order to be proven wrong or to get more information out of somebody when really I've made up my mind and I'm just humoring them.
Sure.
I think but would I call that patience or,
Active patience.
yeah, a tactic? I'm not sure.
I think if it comes from a bad intention, it's a tactic. I think if it's active because that's who you want to be, even though you haven't solved the other part of it, which is the humility side.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's sort of like the framework is in a preferred structure of like working on these things one by one. You solve for the humility. Okay, now in this patience, it'll show up. Whereas if it's the other way, if you're just showing patience, but inside you have no humility, like at least you're acting on the patience. That's better than not actually being patient.
But I think, there's a level of patience in me sitting here and just letting you talk and waiting for it to be over. And then there's a different level of patience involved in, I don't understand what you're saying, so I'm going to keep asking questions and listen actively until I can figure it out or we find some commonality. And that might take a really long time. But if the stakes are that important to me, or I've determined that they're that important, then I have no choice. And whether or not that's patience or grit, I wouldn't say I'm adept enough practitioner or exhibitor of those two things in order to be able to tell the difference at any given moment.
Probably depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Whether it's grit or patience.
Or what we're talking about, to be fair.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
If we're talking about data tables, I might get a little excited.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think there is something important there in working through like your own ability to grow within patience, because at the end of all of this, that's what it's all about. It's looking inward and trying to discern, how patient am I as a person? If I lack patience, where's that coming from? And trying to sort of like troubleshoot myself through my own self-analysis, which is a really hard thing to do. I think it's the understanding and the reflection of what you want. And this is becoming more and more of a theme where we're referring to the virtues as tools, or the attributes as tools. And so you've said this once already, understanding that patience can just be a tactic. Maybe that's a great place for someone to begin. Okay, I want to achieve this thing. It's going to require patience. Therefore, deploy that tool.
And in my personal experience, which, as you said earlier, people are complex, so I don't necessarily share any or all I don't know with most people. But my outcomes are often better when I don't resort to emotion or heightened states. If I can be deliberate, I need to be patient, and I prefer a deliberate approach.
Right. So you've set out the person you want to be. You've determined what that is. Maybe it's based on outcome.
I think I've even reverse engineered it.
Right.
In that I've been able to do a bit of pattern recognition and also knowing, I don't like having hard conversations. I know that's like a silly thing to say. We all have to do them. They're just not fun.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I would rather not do. So if I can get the same outcome, maybe it takes a little bit longer. And obviously, again, like we said, there are circumstances where you need to have a quick result. So that all goes out the window. And I understand that. And there's also like I said at the beginning, there's a risk analysis that's happening in real time, depending on the situation I'm in. But if I can have a deliberate, patient approach, that's the one I'll go for, because more often than not, it's a frictionless or a lower friction way to get a result that I believe will be an optimal one. I would also caveat that, and that's idealized. That whole thing is framed on, I've gotten the outcome that I want. It doesn't always go that way.
Right. Now, something I was thinking about for patients is comprehension, a general understanding, maybe of someone. And I think you were talking about this earlier, but I'm gonna bring this into the conversation in terms of like a relationship, friendship, romantic relationship, whatever the case may be. Something I've struggled with, and this brings in your conflict resolution side. I've struggled with my lack of patience for someone else's lack of patience in conflict resolution. That sounds like a lot, but what I mean is when there's conflict of some sort, I want to resolve it immediately. Hey, because I just care what's true. So like I don't have, in most cases, I'm not perfect. In most cases, I don't have much of an emotional attachment to the conflict or like my position within it. I just want to solve it. And if that means I'm wrong, that's fine. If I did something wrong, no, that's okay. Just, I want to know, I want to understand it. Where did I go wrong?
Right.
Fix it, I'll apologize. It's okay. What I've struggled to understand in the complexity of people is their lack of patience in conflict resolution and needing time before they can come back to the table to begin the process of the conflict resolution.
Sure.
I'm impatient with their impatience. I just want to solve it. Let's just solve it. Why do we have to wait?
Yeah.
What's the reason? Well, there's two people. There's dynamics. It's not just about you.
Sure.
And I totally understand that.
People process at different speeds.
Yes. But it's something that I've struggled to reconcile. And one of the things that's helped me is to focus on learning more about people. And everyone's so different and complex. And, I've said that many times, but it's because their history is the stories they've told themselves or they've been told, how they've been taught, their experiences that inform the person that you're in conflict with in that moment, how they see it. Something might be small and innocuous to you, but could be big to them because of something you know nothing about that happened to them that created this trigger. And so patience is important. But I think for me, I've been able to improve in that area by learning to understand more beyond myself.
Right. And again, there's also degrees of separation in that, going back to my traffic example, these people aren't intentionally slighting me, even if I take it as a slight.
Right, yeah.
But because I don't know them, I feel no responsibility to preserve a relationship with them.
Sure.
And that's why the demon comes out.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've even raised my voice in a conversation with Jess before in our entire relationship because I care about preserving that relationship. In the same way I don't scream at coworkers or get nasty with them or insult them because I prefer a productive relationship. If that means I have to be patient or gritty because it means I'm suffering through something I dislike or I don't have decision-making power, that's the way she goes. Because I feel that I can get more out of maintaining a relationship with those individuals than anything else. And that seems a bit transactional when I'm talking about the relationship with my wife. Obviously, like, things are great.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hurt that. I don't want to tarnish what we have. We've spent a long time building something very tight, very strong. And all relationships should be like that in a way.
Yeah. And so there's a care that you have for the outcome and the necessity of patience as a tool.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. I think we talked about this last time, and I'm sure, to be fair, every episode we do on a virtue, it's probably going to continue to show up over and over again. But sometimes virtues, we're either sitting higher at them, or as some people might describe, something comes more naturally to us, whether that's, environmental or not. Who knows? I don't know that it necessarily matters. But let's say patience came easier to me than you. That doesn't mean that you don't need to develop that virtue as a tool. It just might mean that you need to spend more time on it than I do.
Yeah.
If you're sitting at 40%, I'm at 60%, I want to get to 80, you want to get to 80. Okay, I only have 20 to go. I don't need to deploy a ton of resources towards that.
Yeah.
Whereas for you might have to. Conversely, another virtue, courage, you might be at 60, I'm at 40. I'm going to have to put a lot more resources towards that one. Or maybe where I'm at, the season I'm at in my life, it's not ideal. I do want it to get to 80. I don't need courage that bad right now. I probably will at some point, but I need these other ones. I'm going to focus on my resource deployment on these other ones, and then I'll get back to that at some point. But I'm going to, order of priority. What are the things that I need to focus on now? What are the things that need my time and attention? And I'll give it to those.
Yeah.
But if you're not evaluating yourself, if you're not looking inward enough, if we go back to the beginning, the whole purpose of this, it's looking inside, exploring the inner citadel. Where do I need work?
Sure.
And then also being patient with yourself. In the same way we talked about the nutrition and the same patience is going to be required on this journey. If you're following the Transferable Everything framework step by step by step, I promise you it's going to require an incredible amount of patience. I was thinking about, not in the self-exploration, but just in my pursuit of say, like studying a particular topic. So this morning, after I left the gym, I said I was doing the Peterson Academy course on Aristotle. I left thinking, I can't believe how much there is that I don't know. And like, that's become a bit cliche, but like I had to deploy some patience because
I feel like Bane right now. You merely adopted it. I was born in it.
In the dock.
There's tons to know.
It's
too much.
Yeah, and I recognize that
you have to choose the things that you feel are important to know.
Yeah.
Which is the unfortunate thing.
And then you have to deploy patience. Like, I would love to know, like, I want to explore all of truth. I want to explore the world. I want to see everything. I want to learn as much as I can about everything.
Right.
You have to be patient with that because it can't happen overnight. And you realistically probably will never get to see or know everything.
It might not happen at all.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we can work on cultivating these things, and we should, but it's important to recognize that there are going to be moments where emotion or irrationality does take over. We've used the word development and cultivate a lot when speaking about these virtues and these traits. I don't know if we've ever used the word train, but I think it's appropriate also to say that we train ourselves to do these things. And I want to use that word because you've said this to me before, and I've read it elsewhere, but we can pull it to a military context, which is in heightened states of emotion, you do what you've trained yourself to do. That becomes your default. And so if you're not working on building these things, when you do encounter those moments, you're more likely to default to something that will probably produce a less desirable outcome.
That's a perfect analogy. The military context of that. I actually think that might have a place in the book somewhere to like intentionally put that in there, because that's exactly it. The whole premise is to intentionally train virtues. The world is our classroom, as one of the chapters near the beginning is exactly that. It's everything within our world, every interaction, everything we do is an opportunity to train the virtues if we do so intentionally. And that's such a good point, because I can see that within myself. We often call it maturity. And I don't know if it's like a maturity or we've just have a lot more experience and we've trained those those virtues that much more, that our response improves over time. And then so the question is, can we intentionally do that and expedite that? Do we have to just wait for some magic number before we're trained sufficiently?
Right.
Or can we move quicker towards that?
Sure.
I think, and this is something I've thought about quite a lot, because of evolution, of course we can. We should. It's just like, an electrician. An electrician that's, in their, I don't know, say mid-20s, early in their career, should be theoretically far more advanced at that age than their predecessor was. Because they should be getting all of their knowledge, plus anything new, and compounding it. And I think the same thing can be true for virtues. Although I think we've lost that a little bit, where we've not made the intentional training and development of virtues a priority. But hopefully we can return to that a little bit.
Sure. To add something that I don't know if this is appropriate enough to keep in the podcast, but virtues and the like, the level of development in those things maybe being lost or less than compared to the past, and to draw a parallel to the example of the electrician. I have been exposed to this, and I have seen or heard of others talking about this, and I don't know if it's unique to any particular trade, just to our specific job market, or where we find ourselves in this particular moment in time. But job protection and job security is often talked about in that skilled tradespeople do not want to share their knowledge, or they do not want to share their skills, because they believe having that in the back pocket is job security. And so maybe the apprentice is not being given all of the trade secrets. They're not giving that foundation of knowledge to accelerate them along. I guess the parallel I'm trying to draw on is that we cannot allow the same thing to happen to traits or virtues or the like, character development. If anybody who's listening, anybody like you, anybody in a leadership position, who is able to think about and land on the way they were able to do these things, to train these things, should absolutely be shared.
100%. I think that's one of the things that I've struggled with in starting the podcast is like, well, not exactly. Not that I wouldn't want to share these things. There's the question of who am I to do that? But I think everyone has to take responsibility for the development of society and others more intentionally. Like, if you have a set of knowledge, you have a responsibility to share it. Now, if you want to commoditize it, sure, you're making it accessible. It might be transactional, but it's still accessible to some degree. It's accessible for some people. And then maybe they take that and they commoditize it and it becomes more accessible to more people downstream. That's fine in a capitalist society. But I think the only way something like that exists, like the trades example, is the lack of virtue and the lack of character that those people might have. Because they're responding from a place of fear, not a place of strength. And with that personal development, with that focus on virtues or a strong philosophical understanding of its importance, that it actually will move the world forward. And you get to be a part of that. I think it just comes from a place of fear. And I think a lot of people make decisions from a place of fear. And I think that slows everything down. It might be masked as patience, but in most cases it's fear. A lot of my decisions that I've analyzed, if I'm moving slower or I'm reluctant to do something, I've looked back at it and realized, okay, that was actually coming from a place of fear. And that context changed how I looked at it, because I don't want that. And sometimes our subconscious, to protect us or thinks it's protecting us, might do that. But it's not necessary. And so that tension will always exist, but we have to continuously think thoughtfully about it.
Sure.
Be patient with ourselves and so forth. I don't know if that entirely answers what you were talking about.
I'm not even sure where I was trying to land. It was,
I think that this goes back to, in part, my critique of education. So I went through this exercise because I was trying to be critical of myself in my constant critique. And what I landed on was about a balanced approach. What would it look like to me in a school system for child development? To me, the balance would be, okay, I see why there's a value and a need to measure certain parts of testing, education, and so forth, particularly in like STEM fields, right? Okay, fine. Then let's just agree that both are important. Let's make it 50-50. Half of the curriculum is STEM, and it follows a similar thing that we have today. You want your Scantron tests and all your KPIs and measurables. Sure, do that. And then the other 50%, let's focus on thinking, philosophy, exploring ideas, the Socratic method, being okay with exploring not just an idea, but our response to it. Those things can be guided within a school system. I mean, we have so many historical examples of that. I think we've just not prioritized it. And even if it doesn't work as well as I would like it to, I think it's still worth the effort. And so you don't lose entirely by having a 50-50 split. But I think to your question is, I think we're moving so quickly as people between objectives, and the world's advancing and changing so rapidly, and we're not taking enough time to pause and to think about our response to a thing that we're thinking about, to think about what we want in the outcome. Do we want truth, or do we want to be right? That one question in and of itself requires a lot of thinking, self-exploration. There's a lot of time that goes into that. For me, it feels easy, but that's because, if I'm honest, it took me time, a lot of reflection, a lot of being wrong and being unhappy with the outcome and all of those things. And so I think if we spent more time on that, and which is obviously why we're here.
Sure.
To offer that up to anyone who's interested is to explore and ask deep, meaningful questions, why it's important. And I think if you had a society that had at least a little bit of that, at whatever the cost is to us, I think that would be deeply meaningful.
Sure.
I think that would change a lot. And I think it would serve us a lot more. And you know what? If AI, the calculator in your pocket, which we don't even need the calculator in our pocket anymore because we have a friend beside us being AI.
I could just talk to my sunglasses.
Yeah. Like, hey, what's, this plus this minus this multiplied by this? Okay, it'll give you the answer.
Right.
And it's going to be more right than you are. And maybe right now we don't need to second guess that. Other things, yes, but maybe that one we don't. Okay, so we have a lot more access to information, things to do things for us. So let's use that then as an opportunity to revert back to something that might have been lost. We can chalk it up. It was important that we focused on skill mastery. It's what was necessary to move the world forward. Okay, fine. Well, let's adapt. Now it's time for us to refocus on virtue.
Sure.
At a societal level. And we don't want to be dogmatic. We don't want to, I'm Catholic, Christian, I have a strong faith, but I'm okay. If you want to keep it secular, great. Philosophy is perfect for that. Let's use philosophy to ask deep, meaningful questions. We don't have to teach something specifically as definitive. This is true. Let's focus on asking questions of, is it yes or no? I don't know. Let's explore it. And there doesn't need to be a right answer at the end. It's just about exploring.
This has nothing to do with patience, this next thing I want to say.
Yeah.
But you mentioned progress, moving things forward. Maybe such and such conditions were necessary to get us to where we are. And maybe we need to allow technology to take those things from us now so we can focus on maybe more important like humanity level stuff. I would question or ask about which of those things that we've experienced since pre-industrial revolution were actually necessary. What is progress? What is it even?
Yeah, so
You know, like beyond basic survival needs, let's call it food and water, as simple as that, agriculture. Beyond that, what is progress? And what of it was necessary to get us here? Was it a misstep? Sure, there's benefits of convenience and comfort and so forth, and interconnectivity, shared knowledge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But how has that changed us as a species? Where have we landed? Has it been progress? It's certainly been field level advancement. But speaking to the human condition, humanity broadly, can I frame it as progress if so many things have gone wrong along the way? Again, it's got nothing to do with patience and probably doesn't deserve any place on this podcast. I'm kind of just
no, it's okay.
Thinking a lot.
It doesn't. We don't have to be stuck on the topic in of itself. If it goes there, it goes there.
Yeah.
You know, I should say, like, part of I'll tie it into patience because we have to think about it. We have to ask hard questions and think about it, and that takes patience.
Sure.
To sit with something long enough. To not just jump, we said this at the beginning, but not just to jump at the first answer that comes to mind. Or if you do, you still leave the room to be wrong. But to the question, that's hard to say, of course, and there's, who knows?
Yeah.
Really is the answer. But
ultimately, what's happened has happened.
Yes.
And we can't revert that.
No, but we can analyze it.
Sure.
And if there's lessons to be learned from it, then it's important we do so. I'm a huge proponent of that. We don't have to, critiquing the past. We were actually talking about this before we went live, but critiquing the past, I think, is just so much about just understanding where we went wrong and not trying necessarily to course correct the past or go back and make some changes because we can't. It's just about taking the lesson, downloading it, moving it forward so we don't make the same mistakes again.
Right.
And I think that has to be the general focus. So I do think it's important, that's a really important question to understand why we did certain things. I'm sure there's tons of things we did wrong.
Sure.
Or our ancestors did.
Right.
There's tons of things we've done wrong in our time.
Yeah.
In the place. But there's also a level of patience and appreciation that there's no book of do this, do this, do this. We're all operating in this world and as a society collectively moving things forward without having any clear direction or, it's not a cookbook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard, but I think that if we consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're moving closer towards more of the cognitive self-esteem side of things. We don't know what that will produce. and that could produce something beautiful. So we start to improve certain things, and maybe this is worth thinking about with Maslow. Is, we're safer, even though the news or social media might say otherwise. We're safer today than we were previously. We were talking about this before. We have hot showers, we have food readily available to be Ubered to wherever we are. We've reduced
Medicine's better. Sure.
So many things are better. Okay, it's Steven Pinker.
Steven Pinker.
Yeah. Steven Pinker is a Harvard cognitive psychologist and linguist.
I respect the hair game.
So, to quickly summarize, a lot of his work is basically around acknowledging that things are better today than they've ever been. It sounds like a huge stretch. I think most people accept that, but
yeah,
a lot of his work is just like actually like proving that. And so there's progress there. I think in many ways we don't feel like there's progress because maybe we're more unhappy than we've ever been. There's more mental health than we've experienced. And so maybe that's just because that's the next frontier that we have to solve for. We have to spend more time with meaning and purpose as a society, building that in. We spend more time on the self because now that we don't have to spend as much time on saber-toothed tigers surrounding us, being fearful at night and, rotating who's staying up on guard and on shift and all of the things that our ancestors had to do. Now we're spending more time looking within that metacognition. And this is where our battleground is. This is where we as a society, as a generation, are responsible to move things forward. Everyone's had a responsibility to move things forward. We never actually talk about that as a generation. Like, what are we supposed to progress forward? Others, they explored new land, then they set that up and they wanted to build villages and they wanted to build community. And like, there's this building process for them. And I think it's probably, I can't imagine that they didn't see that as like, okay, well, like we want to fortify this house and we can give it to our kids. Build this farm and our kids can have it and then their kids. And you could see those things. Well, I think maybe this is our thing, is we need to build that sense of meaning and purpose. That's what our legacy could be if we focus on that. And so we progress things forward. And again, looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's important, especially in the absence of other things that we no longer really need to worry about in the way that we used to.
Right. This might be a bit bleeding heart, but when I think about the core things that I would consider being requirements, shelter, food, water, and then you stack on top of that whatever you need to survive. We have many people and an increasingly large number year over year in our communities who don't have homes. They can't eat. They're sleeping on the streets. I don't know necessarily if we can call what we have currently as progress when that exists, even though we have Amazon distribution centers all over the place. It's progress for some, it's not progress for everybody.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'd say that significantly less is progress. I would say we've solved, at least in the Western world, most of the homelessness for people without homes. Now, that's hard to imagine because it does exist.
By all statistical accounts, it's actually getting worse right now, year over year.
I think that's more of a consequence of the mental health side rather than the economic side. I could be completely wrong on that.
Sure.
But I don't know how many people we have completely unhoused that is, at least in Canada,
sure,
that are completely unhoused. We have a lot of social safety nets, and I'm down for the social safety nets. I think it's important. and I want that in a society that I live in,
Sure.
because there's things that we can control and there's things we can't.
Yes.
My understanding is a lot of the homelessness or the unhoused is due to mental health. That's something that it's paradoxical because we don't want to take away people's rights, but we also want to help them. And so there's kind of a void in the gap between those two things.
Yeah,
and that's
there's
where
an
people
autonomy conversation. Do they want to be helped?
totally.
Can they? And I don't mean to be derogatory. I'm kind of speaking in a world I have no experience in. But do they have the faculties to even, like at a certain point, make those decisions for themselves?
Sure. Yeah. I think all of those things exist. And so I think, kind of going back to what I was saying is, I think Mother Teresa said, the greatest disease in the West is loneliness. And I think that's because we've solved all of these other things that other parts of the world haven't. And through that, we've created more separation as we've solved for them. Bigger homes, broader distances, less connectivity, less community, all of those things focused on material goals. We've solved those things, but we've neglected another piece on that bar graph. And I think recognizing that is important, and figuring out how we can solve for that will be really important. I actually think it'll be one of the most important things we do with emerging AI, because it will become a greater and greater problem. If right now, whether, I would probably encourage people not to build their sense of identity within their job, but for many people, that is their sense of meaning and purpose, and that's what keeps them grounded,
Right.
with it, like cognitively and mentally, because they have a meaning and purpose. I get up, I go to work. The job might not be my purpose, but feeding my family is.
Yeah.
And when you take that away from somebody, they no longer have that purpose, then what?
Sure.
And so if that happens rapidly, we're going to need a solution for that very, very quickly. And I think we see that today in some of the mental health side where, there's a lack of meaning and purpose, and this is what the downstream impacts could be.
Yeah.
And so even though we've solved all these material things, if we can't solve that, conversely, we have examples. If we look to places that are far less developed than we are, far less advanced than we are, definitely far less materially rich, they already know what the solution is because they're enduring physical scenarios that are much, much more dire than ours, and they're doing so not more productively, but they're doing so with like maybe a fuller heart, sense of purpose, and so I think that's probably down to the community, the relationships that are built, certainly in part in shared hardships and things like that. So I would like to see us find that within what we already have. I don't know the solution exactly to that,
Sure.
but there has to be one. And outside of solving for that, we also don't know what the beautiful side of giving us a new focus could bring. So if we no longer have to worry about showing up to work, that's going to hurt a lot of people, and we have to solve for that. And it also could empower a lot of creative minds, beautiful minds that we weren't exposed to previously, and something that we have no idea that might exist might be built from that. So like there's a tension. Two things can exist. It's the overlapping Venn diagram. I think too often we're focused on the negative, and that's real, and we do have to solve for that.
Sure.
But there's also the excitement of something beautiful that can come from it. But we always want to anticipate. I know what will happen.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah. Well, we also have no choice but to strive towards something better. I guess you have the choice to just sit and wallow. But I just mean to say we cannot tangibly change the past.
Right.
So we need to obviously take it into account. Big proponent of studying historical texts for that reason. and then allow other people's mistakes to help inform our decision making moving forward.
Absolutely.